Saturn Death Cult. Preface. This work defines the Saturn Death Cult as the accumulated historical legacies of those occult and criminal agendas and organizations that seek justification for their actions and existence based on a corrupted interpretation of Saturnian myth and lore. There have been, and still are, many such agendas and organizations. This ebook is, therefore, an introduction to an alternative natural history of the planet Saturn that may provide an explanation for the emergence of fearful rituals and agendas believed to be practiced and promoted by cult elites the world over. It makes an intuitive style attempt to link certain mythology-inspired sex murder blood rites to the rise of an international financial system dedicated to establishing a form of debt slavery as a means of maintaining select elites in their positions of power and control. This work also provides scenarios for a better understanding of some of the historical and mythic records, more intriguing events. It makes conclusions as to why we live in an increasingly violent and destructive world, and how this world is manipulated by the agenda of various Saturnian-based belief systems and the organizations that have grown up around such a belief system. The views expressed in this work are largely influenced by two separate streams of thinking. One is the relatively young science of plasma cosmology, which provides an alternative understanding of planetary and space physics based on electrical principles. The other is the notion of a historical occult influence on the physical, spiritual, and financial development of humankind in its thinking. All I hope to do is possibly illustrate a connection between these two streams of thought by establishing a principle based on the radical reinterpretation of mythology as the witnessed record of natural historical events. As the author of this work, I am solely responsible for the views and theories put forward. I speak for no other person or organization and fully accept many will take exception to my interpretation of their own views and theories where they appear. Where other authors are cited, this should not be construed to imply their endorsement of any of the content found within. Acknowledgements. Saturn Death Cult only provides minimal reference notes to the ideas and theories put forward in its text. There are, however, important people, researchers, and organizations that have positively contributed to this work, even if they may not share in its conclusions or motivations. My thanks to the team at thunderbolts.org for providing a wonderful resource for everything electric universe and its subset known as Saturn theory. The late Eduardo Cardona, whose voluminous works investigating the scientific and cosmological evidence for Saturn theory never ceased to provide me with new profitable insights into this difficult subject. David Talbot, a pioneer and don of Saturn theory research. Get well soon, David. Your calm guidance and leadership is much to be cherished. Walt Thornhill, whose insights into brown dwarf stars and electric universe physics are second to none. Don Scott, whose book The Electric Sky introduced me to the wonders of the electric universe model. Professor Scott has been a welcome voice of encouragement to me and developed some of cosmological hypotheses outlined in this work. The late Immanuel Velikovsky, whose seminal works, Ages in Chaos and Worlds in Collision, put me on the path that has directly led to the cosmology and some of the historical theories put down in this work. Dr. Joseph P. Farrell, whose research into alternative histories in the fields of international banking and finance, as well as the complex machinations of post-war Nazis, the transhumanist movement, ancient planetary conflicts, and the UFO phenomenon, all I can say is wow. Henrik Palmgren, whose invitation for me to appear on his excellent Red Ice radio show effectively launched public awareness of the Saturn Death Cult way back in 2012. Jay Widener, who has been a source of encouragement and inspiration. And finally, but not least, my partner in crime and co-author in Cosmos and Collision, indefatigable and generous Ted Holden, renegade and scourge of the alt research internet, and the best sounding board I ever had. Yeah, Ted is good for that. Haha, that's cool. Go, Ted. The Saturn Death Cult Part 1. The story of the planet Saturn and the rise of the gods and history. The hidden link down through the ages between global cataclysms, sex, magic, blood rituals, and guns, oil, drugs, and slavery. An overview. This book postulates that the planet Saturn was once a free-floating brown dwarf star with Earth as one of its satellites. It claims that Earth was still a satellite of Saturn at a time when ancient peoples spoke and wrote of Saturn as Earth's original sun. This book is also a discussion of Saturn's cataclysmic capture by our current sun, possibly the most monumentous event in human history, before its subsequent banishment to the outer reaches of our current solar system. It is argued that these cosmic events have shaped world mythology, the many religions and beliefs that have been derived from the mythological records. This is the story of the planet Saturn and how it became a god, both the supreme creator being the world's deadly destroyer, how Saturn launched the ages of man as recorded in the mythological, esoteric, and occult traditions. Modern world dominated by uniformitarian scientific theories of geological gradualism and the steady advance of biological evolution. This is a story that is difficult for the uninitiated to accept, but this story, in all its mythological madness and confusion, is the misunderstood basis for secretive mystery schools and warped theologies, for sex and blood-based rituals, alchemically driven sciences and arts, and for the origins of dark and perverted political philosophies. It is a story that is the driving force behind the continuing struggle between those who believe themselves to be the blood elites and those of the earth, humanity. It has become the unseen conflict between the love of money and the love of justice. It is a story that provides the driving motive for those who would commit conspiracies to suppress others, and yet the memory of this story lies hidden beneath our collective fears for the future. This story is both the record of the word and its opposition to the actions of the flesh. A story that endures from the beginning of the human experience and is both the origin of civilization and the destruction of civilizations. It is the story of the 4 ages of man, our hopes for a new golden age. The hope that somehow mankind will find a way to replicate the glories of an age when Saturn ruled supreme. This story of Saturn is the world's hidden history, the occult. What follows in this book is a simplified view of myth as history, and history as a form of mass ritual conducted over multiple generations down to the modern era. The thoughts, statements, and concepts put forth in this book should serve purely as an introduction to a set of radical and changing ideas upon which to launch one's own investigations. It is meant to be an intuitive rather than intellectual overview of the cosmological, mythological, and occult evidence for the existence of a cultural phenomenon this writer refers to as the Saturn Death Cult. That's Troy McLaughlin. Esoteric traditions generally talk of a cycle of 4, and sometimes 5 ages of man. Broadly speaking, these traditions split mankind's experiences into a golden age, a silver age, a bronze age, and an iron age. They are the accepted epochs in the ages of mankind according to ancient understanding. These different ages should not be confused with the modern scientific community's chronological demarcations of a Stone Age, Bronze Age, and Iron Age historical progression, but should be seen as referring to those ancient Greek and Roman writers who sought to explain human history in a context of ancient mythology. The ancient Grecian poet Hesiod spoke of 5 ages of man, in which he added the heroic age, between the Bronze Age and the Iron Age. Most, however, are content to follow the Roman poet Ovid's traditional 4 periods that are divided into gold, silver, bronze, and iron. According to these traditions, we are said to currently live in an Iron Age of industry and technology, a continuation of Ovid's Iron Age in which men demarcate nations with boundaries, have learned navigation and mining, are warlike, greedy, and impetuous, and truth, modesty, and loyalty are nowhere to be found. Before that, there was the Bronze Age of heroic mythology, and that was preceded by a Silver Age of priestly knowledge in which the seasons and agriculture were introduced to the world. A new world that had been born out of the chaos that ended that greatest of ages, the mythic paradise christened as the Golden Age, an age of perfection, justice, and peace, an age ruled by the mighty creator god Saturn. Today, however, humanity finds itself mired in the iron grip of a global dystopia, a dysfunctional world locked in an age of controlled resource scarcity and the slavery of unbreakable debt. We are ruled by an international finance system that is based on the crime of usury, the tyranny of debt-based money that is issued and controlled by a mercantile-minded elite whose roots go back centuries. However, there is a strain of belief within the occult world that mankind is destined to establish a new golden age, to make evolutionary leap forward in which a selected and elite portion of humanity will ascend to the mantle of the god Saturn and establish their own authority over the cosmos. Just as the golden age ended in death and destruction, so too will a new golden age be engineered to emerge through the annihilation of the unworthy and the purification of those who remain. The previous age, artist's interpretation of the 4 ages of man, according to the esoteric traditions, from left to right, the lost paradise of the Golden Age, the priestly Silver Age, the heroic Bronze Age, the modern debt-enslaved Industrial Iron Age. For millennia, certain hidden sects within the occult world of elitist Saturn worship have been attempting to achieve this new Golden Age through ritualistic and alchemically based transformations of the human species. Some of these occult practices have resulted in abominations and atrocities of the most hideous kind: child sacrifice, mass murder, war, and today it is the hope for the quasi-scientific and technologically induced evolutionary breakthrough in creating the perfect human that still drives them to commit such crimes. They seek the birth of the Star Child. But behind the occult push for human transformation is the worship of the mythological god Saturn and the desire to return to the Golden Age he ruled over. To understand why this cult of Saturn still exists, we must go back further in time, before Saturn, to a time mythology remembers as the Purple Dawn.
Next will be Part 2, Purple Dawn to Doomsday.
Purple Dawn of Mankind by Troy McLachlan. In the beginning, there was only darkness. Yet in that darkness there was already Raven. He was still small and weak, and his special powers had not fully developed. From an Eskimo creation myth, Raven being their version of the Saturn archetype. C.M. Wood, Heroes and Hunters, from North American Indian Mythology, New York, 1982, page 17. Before the Golden Age of Saturn, or Kronos, as he was known to the Greeks, a time in which mankind was said to have enjoyed a tranquil and plentiful existence, bathed in the flawless light light of a perfect and timeless sun. There was a primordial dawn of eternal twilight. In the earliest legend with which the recital, i.e. the Kojiki, opens, one recognizes the primal myth, the development from a primordial darkness and chaos. This is the Kronos legend in its 1,000 forms, the father of all mythologies, upon which so many peoples have constructed their cosmogony. P. Wheeler, The Sacred Scriptures of the Japanese, New York, 1952, page 387, as quoted by Dordu Cardona, Godstar, 2006. Some mythological cycles feature a primitive age of darkness before the existence of the sun, when human beings lived in a state of anarchy without the techniques of civilized life. H. Osborne, South American Mythology, Mythology of the Americas, London, 1970, page 294, is quoted with emphasis by Dordu Cardona, Godstar, 2006, page 278. Note in the second of the two above quotes the reference to an age of darkness before the existence of the sun. According to E.A.S. Butterworth, the sun of the ancients is not the natural sun of heaven, for it neither rises nor sets, but is, as it seems, ever in the zenith above the navel of the world. There are signs of an ambiguity between the pole star and the sun. Yet those words belie what mythology is inferring when it speaks of an age of darkness. We should not construe this age to be one that was black as night, but rather that the available light was subdued and hued with a distinctive color that would come to be associated with Saturn. Tecohuatl, an alter ego for Quetzalcoatl, Aztec Saturn, who is credited as being the first light at creation, is the god of the dawn light that was created before the sun. The Roman poet Martinius Capella provides a clue as to what color this light was when he has the goddess Harmonia declaring that the rays from the god Jupiter renew the purple dawn for men, an obvious reference to a previous age before Jupiter's ascent in place of Saturn. The Hopi tribe of North America have songs that talk of a dark purple light of creation coming from the north, while the Chinese still refer to the celestial northern pole region as the purple pole. In all cases, and many others, the color purple is linked to Saturn, especially during a primordial time remembered in mythology as the dawn of creation. What this tells us is that there once was a distantly ancient age wrapped in a sea of dark celestial purple, a purplish light that radiated a dense and global warmth that seems to have emanated from a single dull orb, shining at a time well before the arrival of the sun. We see today this glowing disk appears to have been permanently stationed at the far north of the heavens, as the late researcher Dordu Cardona surmised. The evidence of myth, which points to Saturn having once occupied a position above Earth's north polar regions, is voluminous. There is not a race on Earth that has not preserved at least one account which states as much. According to this evidence, Saturn occupied a central position in the north celestial regions. It rotated, and rotated widely, but other than that, it was immovable. Cardona, 78. It is this darkened and primordial sun, this dull and immovable orb, that would eventually become the god and planet known as Saturn. But before Saturn rose to his status as the great creator god of mythology, primordial man spoke of this time as the great dream time of our distant past, a time celebrated in the oral and written traditions of ancient peoples the world over. Like a man was the sun when it showed itself. It showed itself when it was born and remained fixed in the sky like a mirror. Certainly, it was not the same sun which we see, it is said in their old tales, the Popol Vuh, Mesoamerican creation story. According to this understanding, at that time, there was no bright yellow sun as we know it today, one that rises in the east and sets in the west. There was no way to calculate the passage of time, to tell day from night. No stars could be seen through the dense atmospheric purple haze that engulfed the heaven. There was no moon from which to tell the passing of time by its phases, or by which the Earth's ocean could be influenced by great tidal forces. Humanity lived in a perpetual state of dusky darkness, everything wrapped within a warm and bountiful purple hue that permeated all existence and in which the nocturnal thrived. Like a giant blind reddish purple eye looking onto the world from within a swirling heavenly purple chaos, primordial man would have seen Saturn as a single pale disk of light radiating its benign presence from a position locked at Earth's celestial north. It had always been there, a presence that was an integral yet silently ethereal part of the Earth's landscape and mankind's experience. For how long this state of affairs had lasted, it is impossible to tell. How life on Earth may have looked during the age known as the Purple Dawn, when Earth was in orbit around primordial Saturn, circa 100,000 BC. Saturn can be seen in its primeval state as magenta-hued sub-brown dwarf star. Saturn's famous rings had not yet formed at this time. The murky existence of life on Earth, as suggested the earliest mythological narratives and portrayed in the previous, would have belied the even and global warmth that allowed humans to walk unclothed and troubled by weather extremes. While a semi-nocturnal world seems at odds with modern concepts of what would be a healthy planetary environment, the supposed need for bright sunlight and a rotating calendar of seasons to support life is overstated. All that would be required for the sustaining of a habitable planet is precisely what the myth suggests primordial man enjoyed: an adequate amount of evenly radiated heat energy with a minimum red-blue light spectrum required for photosynthesis in predominantly psilocybin-based plants. Much in the same way that we observe coastal areas supporting submerged red algae under the filtering effects of the oceans, so too would the Earth's primordial environment under Saturn have enjoyed a radiating filtered heat in which red-hued vegetation would have flourished. A collection of pioneering alternative theorists have, in recent decades, sought to identify this dull primordial sun of mythology as having been a brown dwarf star, a fairly common celestial object that would have radiated energy in the red-blue, purple spectrum, rather than the red-green bright light of the sun we see today. Accordingly, when factoring ancient descriptions of the god Saturn in his primordial state, we can determine that if Saturn was indeed a brown dwarf star, then Saturn would have typically produced its own far-reaching heliosphere, or what electric universe proponents call a plasma sheath, a type of electrical bubble which would have extended out into space like a giant egg-like cocoon. The startling supposition is that an electric cocoon of this type would have embraced the Earth and all its inhabitants. The inside of this hypothesized plasma bubble would have acted like a dull mirror, a reflective field that would have uniformly bounced the star's warm radiation back onto all parts of the planet's surface to produce the even purplish primordial glow related to us by these ancient traditions. That's probably where we get light shows from. This reflected light and energy would have produced warm regions at both poles, while almost entirely negating meteorological effects like wind and rain. Weather features so common today under the current sun. To the ancients of the gold, silver, and bronze ages, this dull moon-like disk from the time of the Purple Dawn came to be identified as the sleeping form of the god Kronos, Greek, or Saturn, Latin. In other cultures, it would come to be known as Ra, Egyptian. Enlil, Mesopotamia, Tlaloc, Aztec, later transformation into Quetzalcoatl, and Shangdi, China. Though modern mythologists would later confuse many of these deities as being representations of our current yellow sun, an alternative interpretation of comparative mythology suggests they all share common identity traits with the Roman god Saturn, who was in turn identified directly with the planet Saturn. And that's the problem, is these interpretations later changed a lot of these gods. I've noticed that.
Alchemical traditions have it that this planet Saturn was our original and best sun, the first sun, before the coming of the red-yellow star we call today the sun. Today, this very same pale disk, spoken of in the earliest creation epics of mythology and seen inhabiting Earth's celestial north, can be positively identified as being the actual planet Saturn, at a time when it was in its primordial state as a brown dwarf star. Yet today, the same planet which was said to have once ruled the heavens from up high in the north is now a distant spot of light seen at the outer reaches of our current solar system. But it is the eventful and often frightening journey that the primordial Saturn would take on its path to the outer reaches of the solar system that has become the historic basis for much of the world's mythology and mankind's memory of a once great golden age. It is the forgotten journey that Saturn took from being Earth's primordial sun to its current position as a distant ring gas giant that will help explain the influence of the god Saturn over the warped occult phenomenon central to this work, the Saturn death cult. Locating Earth's original geomagnetic North Pole. It is important to note that Earth's geomagnetic pole would have been in a completely different position at this time to where it is today. Hat tip to Ted Holden. With Earth's current geographic North Pole region having been originally pointed at its original brown dwarf sun, the planet's geomagnetic field would have necessarily still been orientated in line with its celestial north despite its phase-locked equatorial relationship with Saturn. However, this would have positioned a phase-locked Earth's geomagnetic North Pole in a very different position. The best contender for where primordial Earth's geomagnetic north could once have been is strongly suggested by two significant bulges in the Earth's crust. These two bulges happen to be on opposite sides of Earth to each other. The larger one is called the Pacific Bulge, and it is located on the North Pacific's ocean floor between Hawaii and Asia. The smaller bulge is located on the opposite side of the planet in the South Atlantic. If Earth's current northern polar region was once pointed at Saturn as it orbited in phase lock, then Earth's geomagnetic north might likely have been located where the Pacific Bulge is today. Being the bigger of the two opposing bulges, the Pacific Bulge is the best candidate for Earth's original point of geomagnetic north, the bulge having been a possible consequence of Earth's original and differently orientated geomagnetic gravitational forces. The same would have been true, to a lesser degree, in the creation of opposing Atlantic-African bulge. Currently, Earth also has significant bulges in the Arctic and Antarctic regions, where the current geomagnetic north and south poles are found. In the age of the dinosaurs, Earth's distant primordial phase-locked relationship with Saturn was most likely the environment experienced by the dinosaurs while they still walked the Earth. Most animals are nocturnal by nature. The permanent gloom of this time would have suited any nocturnal species, including dinosaurs. The heavy ultraviolet light shed by Saturn was the same beneficial ultraviolet light used today by reptilian pet owners to provide their pets with a basking spot in their enclosures. Reptiles in particular find this kind of ultraviolet light to their liking, as do most species of insects that see best in ultraviolet spectrum. Saturn's infrared spectrum would have also served most mammals well, the vast majority of which are nocturnal. While mammals internally produce their own vitamin C, pigs and humans are the salient exception. Under these postulated Saturnian light conditions, pigs and humans would have needed to eat sources of vitamin C in order to stay healthy. Previous image, Earth during the age of the dinosaurs. The primordial brown dwarf star Saturn sat stationary as Earth orbited Saturn in a phase lock. The future Arctic region was always pointed at Saturn. Geomagnetic North Pole was most likely situated where the present Pacific Bulge is located. A permanent purple twilight saturated the Earth, with Saturn's plasma bubble appearing like a vast heavenly chaotic ocean. The even purple-hued light shed by Saturn and its plasma bubble cast no shadows, and the air was gently still. No rain clouds formed on the Earth, but Saturn's water misted down onto Earth's surface in a dense, humid vapor. Saturn's ultraviolet light spectrum would have been highly beneficial for nocturnal reptilian species. Great. Reptilian species, huh? So now we find out that the purple dawn was most conducive for reptiles. I wonder if there's anything to that David Icke stuff. I wouldn't be surprised. Have you heard of the Emerald Tablets by Thoth? It just so happens the reptile was green. Apparently they were found under a Mayan temple in Mexico. These says in it that one day they will attack those who reside beneath us. How about that? The megafauna giants of the past. Earth's electrical relationship to its primordial brown dwarf star Saturn would have produced a variable and lesser gravity, according to the electric universe principles. This would have allowed for the development of gigantic proportions in many species, most now extinct due to Earth's heavier gravity. When the gigantic fossilized remains of dinosaurs were first discovered, it was assumed that creatures this large would have had to buoy their massive weights by spending their lives in marshes and swamps. But subsequent discoveries have conclusively proven that these monsters spent their lives on dry land. They became the impossible dinosaurs because nobody could work out how their physical structures would have supported their own bulk under current gravitational conditions. Much has been postulated in attempts to explain this challenge to the accepted modern-day physics model that calls for Earth's gravity to have been a constant throughout its existence. These explanations have been inconclusive in the opinion of this writer, mostly because they are usually an effort to fit the evidence of the fossil record with the gravitational environment we observe today. But the more obvious solution is that the dinosaurs, and even some more of the recent mammalian giants, must have thrived during a time when Earth's gravity was much weaker. Earth must have enjoyed a nocturnal purple-like glow and a lower level of gravity during its pre-human past. And this would have facilitated not only the development of larger animals and insects, but also much larger plants and trees. A thick, oxygen-rich atmosphere during its earliest existence would have complemented a lower gravity to allow for the flight of huge pteranodons and the giant insects that we know existed in the very distant past. The successful flight of such creatures with present gravity is doubtful, actually impossible. Golden Age. A time of bliss and plenty, the fabled Golden Age of mankind existed for the duration of Saturn's precarious life as Earth's polar sun, a position threatened by the unstable nature of the newly born planet Venus and the encroachment of the Sun and its own planetary satellites. While initial contact between the plasma sheaths of both the Saturnian system and the Sun had been catastrophic for life on Earth, it also brought about the impetus for the rise of civilization and the golden age of exploration. Time and measure could now be put to use in surveying a world which would give its bounty freely due to the continued radiating warmth of the flared Saturn. But that was not the end of the cataclysmic events stalking the Earth. What was known as the Golden Age would in fact be permeated with catastrophic episodes that would eventually lead up to one of the greatest cataclysmic events in human experience, the Great Deluge, under a new sun. In the time after Saturn experienced its first contact with the electrical influence of the Sun, the new-look Saturnian system spiraled away back into interstellar space. As noted before, the Sun now could be seen from Earth as a distant light rising in the east, and setting in the west. Intense auroral activity created various permeations in the pillar-like Birkeland current that connected Earth to the northern heavenly abode of Saturn. This is why we like light shows at rock concerts. Rock art, or petroglyphs, have captured these permeations in abundance and provide a useful view of the celestial sights witnessed by man during this golden age. It's a nice picture. The pinch effect on plasmas can lead to a shape that would have looked like a squatting man with arms held aloft in support of the heavens. See pictures below for image of plasma in a laboratory environment. Characteristic rendition of this auroral effect has been etched into rock faces the world over. Indeed, looks good. Yeah. Top left, a recreation of the basic squatter man pinch effect captured in plasma laboratory experiment. Top right, American petroglyphs with distinctive squatting man images. Middle right, Spanish squatter man. Bottom right, American starburst pattern. Bottom left, American squatter man under concentric circles. The emergence of totems in various cultures also reflects a heritage going back to the Golden Age, when Saturn's rings appeared as outstretched wing-like crescents atop a glowing ladder. I see. A speculative impression of the classic totem pole legacy as representative of the Earth's Birkeland current. When I was a kid, I just loved totem poles. I was just attracted to them. The twisting, spiraling nature of Birkeland filaments reaching out into space would sometimes terminate in a fork-like effect. This is clearly represented in various rock art petroglyphs as depicted in the above right insert. However, Saturn's spiral journey through space meant that a return to the point of contact with the Sun's heliosphere was inevitable for Saturn and its southerly string of planets. How many times this process repeated itself is unclear, but sufficient to say that each time an approach was made, catastrophic events, deluge, global firestorms, and massive Earth changes could be expected to unfold in both the heavens and on Earth. The Golden Age polar configuration of the Saturn system. Though the ancients would not have perceived this as such, the Saturnian polar configuration now consisted of 4 planets from Earth's perspective. First in line from the northern top of the configuration was, of course, Saturn, itself now surrounded by frozen water rings and orbited by 9 small followers. It still glowed brilliantly after its energizing contact with the Sun's heliosphere. Next in line was the feminine Venus, the evening star, the bride of Saturn, a planet that would display wonderful streamers of light when electrically excited that were seen as 4 and 8-pointed starbursts radiating out from Saturn's center. Whether Venus was ejected by Saturn during the first flare-up or had always been there is not fully understood, but the chaos monster that had heralded her appearance was a direct result of Venus coming to life. After Venus came masculine Mars, red in color, and seemingly enveloped in the womb of Venus. Mars was the morning star, son of Saturn, and viewed as the archetype rebellious hero, unseen during the purple dawn. The massive electrical discharge between Saturn and Mars had obliterated Mars' atmosphere, turning this planet's surface red. These 3, Saturn, Venus, and Mars, formed the heavenly abode, an abode that could only be reached via the heavenly ladder that was the giant plasma Birkeland current that rose from Earth's North Pole, the axis mundi of legend. Earth, the last in this string of planets.
Hey everybody, I just wanted to touch base. I explained my situation at the very beginning, in case you didn't tune in. So I just wanted to let you know. I'm getting better. It's just taking the long way. And if you go back to the beginning, you can hear what's going on with me. I hope everybody's enjoying the show. I'll get back to it right now. I'm slowly coming back, but it's been a bitch.
Was now the humble abode of mere mortals. Interplanetary warfare. It was during these times that the ancients witnessed the beginnings of discord between these godlike planets and began to fear destructive visitations by these celestial bodies. The planet Mars, the dark pupil in the all-seeing eye, that was Saturn, made close approaches to Earth along the length of the visible yet translucent plasma current joining the string of planets. Looming large, it would bombard the Earth with its Martian rocks and thunderbolts before reascending up to its position under Venus, which would itself flare and stream light in awesome displays of cosmic lightning and beauty. Yet Walt Thornhill said that the polar configuration could only work if Mars oscillated between Saturn and the Earth. At least one full-on thunderbolt-laden battle was waged between Venus and Mars, during which Mars suffered a great scarring injury that we now see today on its surface as the huge chasm called Valles Marineris. The warrior god, the scarred face, had earned his battle honors. Yes, that might have been what it looked like. And that was the story of the Iliad, too, if I'm not mistaken. The giant scar of Valles Marineris on the face of Mars, the result of extreme interplanetary electrical arcing between a newborn Venus and Mars, seen from Earth. These terrifying celestial battles have been etched onto the collective memories of mankind in their depictions of Mars as the scarred warrior hero and god of war. Such episodes were looked on with abject terror by Earth's inhabitants and probably accounted for various extinction events in the Earth's history due to the destructive effects of these planetary fluctuations and close encounters. Also, and largely due to the day-night effect of the encroaching sun's equatorially orientated light source. Life on Earth under the Saturnian sun began to look different. Gone was the luxuriant reddish and purple hue of the planet's fauna, and the atmosphere now replaced by the more familiar green cast of Earth's forest and jungles, thanks to the different radiation frequencies caused by the flare-up. Deserts began to appear, and the oceans started to rise. More and more distant stars could be seen at night, and the various constellations began to take shape. Saturn and the axis Mundi, at the height of the Golden Age, midday. Auroral activity at the base of the axis Mundi would have created the illusion of a mountain from which the ladder to heaven ascended. This would be known as the Mountain of the Gods to most cultures, and most famously as Mount Olympus to the Greeks. The slide towards catastrophe. Gravity during the Golden Age started to get heavier. Now that two suns shed their energies over the Earth, with the planet possibly increasing in actual size, to its increased energy, absorption being converted into mass, E equals mc squared. Massive fissures and cracks would have appeared on Earth as a result, with correspondingly dramatic increases in volcanic and earthquake activity. Eventually, Saturn and its family of planets were permanently captured by the Sun, with the result that the Sun began to make a closer yet stable and more regular passage across the sky from east to west. The Saturnian system's polar configuration continued to persist, with Saturn becoming ever dimmer during the day and starting to take on a sick, blotchy look at night. The legendary letter to heaven, that was the Birkeland current connection between Earth and Saturn, started to buckle and itself oscillate, giving the appearance of a decrepit figure now ruling in the northern sky. Already weakened by the various episodes involving the oscillations of Mars and Venus along its length, it was now only a matter of time before the interplanetary plasma current snapped altogether, and Earth would be severed forever from the Saturnian heavenly abode. The catalyst came in the form of the Great Deluge. Doomsday had arrived.
Walk into this room at your own risk, because it leads to the future. This is not a new world. It is simply an extension of what began in the old one. It has patterned itself after every dictator who has ever planted the ripping imprint of a boot on the pages of history since the beginning of time. It has refinements, technological advances, and a more sophisticated approach to the destruction of human freedom. But like every one of the superstates that preceded it, it has one iron rule. Logic is an enemy and truth is a menace. Any state, any entity, any ideology that fails to recognize the worth, the dignity, the rights of man, that state is obsolete. A case to be filed under M for mankind in the Twilight Zone.
Doomsday. A great cataclysm, called the Deluge, is said to have ended the bliss of the Golden Age. Saturn lost its position at Earth's celestial north, and Venus and Mars went on a cosmological rampage. During Saturn's initial flare-up, due to its first contact with the Sun's heliosphere, part of the ensuing chaos that enveloped Saturn had seen two filaments of discharged material escape into space, only to be captured by the Sun there for an unspecified time. They orbited their new star until such a time as when Saturn itself eventually became captured by the Sun. These filaments were primarily composed of Saturn's discharged particles of water, the remainder having been retained by Saturn to form that planet's distinctive ring. And what caused the end of the Golden Age? One of these frozen watery filaments collided with the Earth. As the Saturnian ring of planets was being captured by the Sun, this precipitated a deluge of water from space. It lasted for weeks. These filaments were primarily composed of Saturn's discharged particles of water. Atlantis sank beneath the weight. The great continent of Mu perished. Earthquakes of unimaginable magnitude raked the Earth, while giant winds scoured its surface. The Axis Mundi, Earth's fabled ladder to heaven, was irreparably damaged by this collision, and a decidedly sick, blotchy, and dimming Saturn was clearly starting to drift apart from its former system of planets. Severed from their electrical chain like links to their original sun, the planets Venus and Mars ran amok. Those on Earth watched horrified as Venus took on comet-like aspect, turning into a Medusa and threatening the Earth with massive interplanetary lightning displays as it swooped by on its way to finding its new orbit. The breakup of the Saturnian system, Venus was transformed from a beautiful evening star to evil Medusa with flowing serpent-like hair, an archetype of the rampaging planet Venus, celebrated in art down through the centuries. Earth is overwhelmed by the effects of Venus' erratic behavior, while Mars battles the violent Medusa-like Venus. The collage by Troy, incorporating the works of Duval, Backlund, Martin, and Caravaggio. I wonder if those skulls of Peru are reptilians. Planetary chaos. Mars was no better and constantly threatened to erratically swing by Earth at close quarters while hurling stones and thunderbolts before it. Some of these Martian meteorites have been found as far afield as Antarctica. The subsequent series of battles in this free-for-all phase between Venus and Mars loomed large in the heaven and provided the inspiration for much of mythology's greatest stories. As if this were not enough, the slowly retreating Saturn, or at least its position in the sky over Earth, was now being stalked by another player in the grand cosmic drama, Jupiter. As Earth suffered under the onslaught of the deluge from heaven and the Axis Mundi all but disappeared, Saturn began a descent below the horizon. At this time, another bright star was seen to emerge in what had to have been Earth's southern skies. It too was seen to have rings, and due to the increased electrical activity in the region, also sported its own Brooklyn current, which sent electrical arcing displays out into space around it, and gave the illusion to observers on Earth as if this new star were dangling by a rope. Called Zeus by the Greeks and Jupiter by the Romans, this previously hidden star seemed to briefly supplant the role of dying Saturn as the dominant force in the heaven. And this, or Zeus, was one of the sun's planets. As it orbited into electrical contact with the Saturn system, it could be seen in Earth's southern skies, seemingly dangling on the end of its own Brooklyn current. Faint rings could be detected around Jupiter, giving it the reputation of having stolen Saturn's rings. In mythology, Jupiter was the son of Saturn, who ended up murdering his father and replacing him. Nice. Jupiter is said to have tried stealing the rings of Saturn, an obvious reference to Jupiter's mythological murder of his cosmic father. And they said the same thing of Saturn with Uranus, too. The Jupiter was a part of the Sun's original solar system and acted as a partner in a binary star system. It is one possible contention. However, they share a common barycenter, so I would think that Jupiter would be offspring of the Sun, or born in the same group with it. Their oxygen matches too. This system may have been as much disrupted by the arrival of Saturn as Saturn's system was devastated by contacts on the big boy, with Jupiter then positioned in orbit around the Sun as it is today. Though on a different radius, it can be speculated that it eventually joined the fray by gradually swinging in through Earth's southern skies while on its regular orbit and eventually appearing to come in from behind and below Saturn as seen from Earth. Another theory says that Jupiter and the other gas giants of Neptune and Uranus were always a part of the Saturnian system, but hidden from Earth on the other side of Saturn. Either way, mythology indicates that Jupiter seized Saturn's place and status in the heavens for a time, though Saturn eventually did make a sickly comeback as the reigning Lord of the Rings, as Earth righted itself after the axis-rocking events of the Great Deluge. However, the old god was dying, seemingly struck with leprosy, a result of increased atmospheric activity on the gaseous former star, and now sought permanent exile at the outer edges of the Sun's solar system, where it remains to this day, a distant pinprick of light, somehow at odds with its reputation as one of mythology's greatest gods. With Saturn now drifting off into the outer distance, along with its 7 rings and 9 followers, a cataclysmically shocked Earth now found itself firmly in the grip of its new star, the Sun. The erratic and dangerous orbits of Mars and Venus continued to threaten the Earth, though, as they sought orbital and electrical balance with this new Sun. Whole new societies dedicated to tracking these violent entities rose up amongst the Earth's inhabitants, as the survivors and refugees from the Great Deluge fought to rebuild their shattered home world. The priesthoods were born, and with them, the world entered into the Silver Age. The Silver Age and the rise of the Blue Bloods. The legacy of the Saturn death cult and its effect on mankind really begins with the priesthoods of the Silver Age and the rise of the nobility, the Blue Bloods. Central to the existence of the new Silver Age priesthoods was the belief that what had destroyed the Golden Age could happen again. Utilizing the new technology of writing, they set about recording the cataclysmic events as the Word to serve as a memory and a warning to future generations. These warnings formed the basis of secret societies within these priesthoods. Preparations were made to ensure survival should doomsday return. The advent of writing gave the priesthoods of the Silver Age the technology to keep alive the memories of the cataclysmic end to the Golden Age. As people began to forget how Saturn once ruled the heavens, the increasingly misunderstood records of the priesthoods would become the basis for the beliefs of mystery schools and secret societies down through the ages. The Second Age of Discovery. A second great age of voyage and discovery ensued, in which the refugees of the destroyed Golden Age civilizations determined to make a survey of their transformed world and cosmos and establish through their priesthoods the righteous and justice they perceived to be the legacy of that former age. Weights and measures and calendars were established and enshrined by law in a growing network of interlinked temples and monuments that span the globe. The Masonic mystery schools of the great civilization builders had arrived. Was Egypt's ancient civilization a legacy of refugees that had survived the great cataclysm and had brought the Golden Age to an end? Some esoteric traditions trace Egypt's past to Atlantis. Earth captures the moon. In keeping with the arrival of the Silver Age and its new sun, a new silvery marvel could now be seen in the heavens, Earth's moon. Captured by Earth and the distinctive chaos that was the Saturnian system's demise, was this white globe exhibited crescent-like phases under the sun's light that harkened back to the glory days of the Golden Age, when Saturn's rings would be illuminated as crescents surrounding the former deity. It's a matter of conjecture of when Earth captured the moon. Contrary to popular belief, the moon's heavenly cratered surface is actually proof of extreme electrical strike activity due to the crater's almost uniformly perfect circular shapes. Meteorites and asteroids create angular impact craters and rarely hit celestial bodies at perfect 90-degree angles. Electrical experiments do, however, show electrical lightning produced the same kind of cratering as seen on the moon. The moon's craters can therefore not be used to date the age of the moon based on meteorite impacts, a rare event in any case throughout human history. The new moon proved an excellent keeper of time, yet its arrival would only serve to diminish the memory of the original crescents of Saturn and confuse the knowledge. Preserved in the masses of crescent-like symbols established by the priesthoods, moon cults began to distort the original intent of these symbols. Reminded of that castle, the coral castle over there at Leedscallons. He's got crescents and Saturn in his little abode there with some of his hints. And old knowledge gradually gave way under the weight of the new and more confused fertility rituals. Ominously, the seeds for the more sinister sex and blood rituals that would begin to spread their influences in the ages to come can be traced to the foundation of these early moon cults. The moon's almost uniformly circular craters could not have been created by multiple meteorite impacts, which would have created a majority of angular impact craters. Electrical strikes are a better explanation. Temples, priest kings, and the rise of international commerce. With the establishment of weights and measures, an excitingly new yet dangerously insidious concept began to take hold within the temples of priesthoods: the advent of the universal language of international commerce. The driving factor in the increase of trade in the Silver Age was the newly derived notion of money. At this time, money was issued in the form of clay tablet receipts against the production of goods by any given society or people. This clay tablet money was measured by and limited to the amount of goods that could be produced and stored in people's warehouse. The money was only as valuable as the amount of goods that were actually stored. This had been a central feature of the laws established by the priesthoods in ensuring equal weights and measures. However, discoveries in the mining of gold and silver quickly established a link between these metals and the idea of money. Due to the difficulty in counterfeiting these metals, it was realized that gold and silver could act as an alternative to clay tablets being used as money. This was especially useful when it came to trade between geographically separated peoples who could not verify other people's storehouses, but who would know that gold as an accepted store of value could not be faked. Unfortunately, this international element to trading quickly turned the new gold and silver money into commodities in their own right, as each society refused to accept the clay tablet receipts of other societies. Trade boomed, but at the cost of losing control over regulating the value of the fruits of your labor. That was now in the hands of the gold and silver producers. The laws established by the priesthoods as a way of ensuring just and equal weights and measures were thus cleverly subverted by the introduction of gold-backed money, which was now entirely in the hands of the gold and silver producers. As noted, under this system, the people who actually produced useful items like food and clothing lost any control they had over setting the value of their products. All they could do was price them in gold or silver, the mercantiles. Corrupt elements in the temples quickly saw the advantage in controlling gold and silver as a way of dictating the value for fruits of everyday people's hard labor. With it came the transfer of immense power to highly positioned individuals within the increasingly corrupt priesthoods. As the Silver Age approached its zenith, certain priesthoods quickly consolidated their power via this new money system, until all wealth found itself being concentrated in the hands of a shrinking minority. The temple became this system's center of operations, its central bank, and thus ultimately heralded the emergence of that most insidiously influential of historical characters, the priest kings. These priest kings were the original blue bloods. In reality, they were nothing more than mere merchant bankers with a monopoly over the arguably useless production of gold and silver. With the emergence of these temple-based banking parasites, the peoples of Earth began to experience a new and most sinister force, debt-based slavery. It was at about this time that some mothers started to notice that some of their children were going missing. Origins of the Tower of Babel. The new temple-inspired commerce system proved a pervasive influence from the far eastern realms of the ancient Middle Kingdom and the former heights of Pan and on through the rich lands of Vindhya. Newly established priest kings steadily accumulated wealth and power. In particular, certain elements of the Li clan of ancient China were to grasp this new concept of trade financing and expand upon it to establish unimaginable influence over the hemisphere. Egypt and Samaria and the surrounding nations particularly came under the sway of this global trade system. With it, the slave trade flourished due to the need to mine more and more of the yellow metal. particularly in the mines of ancient Egypt's fishery region. Soon, gold gained idol-like attributes, and its ability to sway the thoughts of men and the love of money steadily supplanted the Golden Age notion of living a just and righteous life. Unfortunately, not with all of us, though. The tragedy was that all the careful work by the early priesthoods in preserving the memory of a righteous and just Golden Age through a system of laws and accurate weights and measures was now being usurped by this new and easily manipulated system of commerce based on gold-backed money. The new system of commerce was the merchant banker's way of trying to build a man-made replacement for the lost heavenly ladder of the Axis Mundi that had served as the original symbol for the ascent to heavenly authority. Under this new system, merchant bankers hiding behind the authority of the temple would be elevated to a position of heavenly-like authority over all commercial activity. The old established concept of authority as being founded on righteousness and justice was now replaced with the merchant banker's debt-based slavery system. No other place exemplified this more than a place called Babel on the ancient plains of Shinar, a future location of the city of Babylon. There, the central banking temple and its merchant bankers saw their financial authority grow to towering proportions, giving rise to the legend of the Tower of Babel. Gustav Dor's Tower of Babel is the popular conception of the Babel legend. This portrays the story as a building project that was halted when the builders' languages were scrambled. Instead, the city of Babel was like the financial center known today as the City of London, and its tower was equivalent to the Bank of England. The scrambling of the languages finds its echo in today's financial collapse, with its myriad of incomprehensible and infraudulent financial products. Your clay tablets are no good here. By the order of High Templar of Babylon, idiot. One day at the gates of Babel. Poor guy. So-called Tower of Babel referred to the high authority of Central Temple which governed the financial system of the city of Babel. If you look closely at the biblical account of the Babel story, you will see that it was primarily a city that was being built on which was abandoned. Reference to a city in the Bible generally means a system or a way of doing things. Compare Jerusalem with New Jerusalem, and Babylon with Mystery Babylon. Man-made economic catastrophe replaces memories of planetary upheavals. Of course, as the ensuing ages would show over and over again, a debt-based monetary system eventually implodes under its own debt-laden weight, and the higher you build its edifice, the mightier the crash. In an age fresh from multiple cosmic upheavals, the peoples of the earth found themselves experiencing something unique, a man-made global catastrophe in the form of systemic economic meltdown. In this way did the so-called Tower of Babel collapse, and the global economic chaos that followed forced whole nations and peoples to go back to their old diverse languages of commerce and trade. A confusion of different weights and measures now reigned, unsupported by any universal and unifying financial system. The priest kings were overthrown, and in their place stepped up the men of great renown, the most famous being Nimrod, the mighty hunter. As is always the case, in the wake of an economic collapse, a time of tyrants follows. Nimrod, pictured left, the original tyrant. Note the Venus starburst he's wearing, like a modern wristwatch. Except, in this case, he knew Venus as Ishtar. Compare Ishtar symbol at right, both images. However, deep within the ruins of the now discredited temples of the priest kings, dark secret societies sought to preserve the concept of debt-based slavery as part of their mystery teachings. These illuminated ones struck a bargain with the Blue Bloods, the deposed priest kings, and embarked on centuries of secret ritual refinement of the old alchemical creed of universal dominance through the power of creating wealth out of nothing, the power to issue debt-based money. As the age of silver drew to a close, more children were noticed to be going missing. On the horizon hovered a menacing figure, the celestial red-painted warrior Mars, and with him came the age of heroes and further upheavals. With him came war and the Bronze Age of men. The Bronze Age. Man as God. With the passing of the Silver Age, a search began for the perfect alloy of God and man. What was once the domain of mighty planets would now be the mythic and heroic exploits of the Bronze Age of man. It would be a time when conflict and war would become man's highest expression. A now comparatively calm cosmos presided over the dawn of the Bronze Age man. For the first time, mankind could look up into the heavens and see a sky not unlike what we see today. Complacency regarding the movements of the planets started setting in, and man began to look within himself as a means of defining both the past and the future. The fear of doomsday shifted radically away from meticulous observation of the planets to a fear of bringing doomsday onto oneself via one's own actions. In this way did the world see the rise of demigods, powerful mythical men and women whose destinies were considered independent of the will of whatever gods had gone before. A golden age meant little in an age where men came to believe they could be a king by their own hand. The warrior king now ruled and assumed the mantle of the Blue Bloods, whose power had been declining after the events at Babel. The age of war was the highest expression of man, now held ascendancy with art and literature, embracing the theme of the individual's will to power as the essence of a new heroic age. However, Mars and Venus were going to have at least one last word on who really did determine the rise and fall of kings and kingdoms. Rivers would run red, locust storms would strip the land, frogs would breed like rabbits, the firstborn children would suffer statistically improbable rates of death. Worst of all, slaves would feel free to throw off their master's yoke, and an old idea of what constituted righteousness and justice would reemerge. Though a promising beginning for this new breed of blue bloods, the Bronze Age of man was not going to be a total picnic. Those warrior kings who would be their own and everybody else's masters. Mars and Venus continue to threaten the Earth. The first clue as to what awaited the inhabitants of the Bronze Epoch could have been deduced from the fate of a little-known city-state that enjoyed a certain specialized agricultural monopoly, courtesy of the rise of agriculture near the end of the preceding age of silver. Some plants had been found to exhibit desirable properties other than nourishment, though this would have been known at a local level for millennia. It wasn't until the advent of concentrated farming that the commercial potential of these certain plants could be realized. Chief amongst these was the now infamous poppy plant, a flower capable of transporting those who indulged in its juices into blissful, myopic trances, free of all lingering doomsday anxieties. In the city-state that enjoyed a monopoly in the cultivation and distribution of this highly addictive drug, Sodom and Gomorrah. Sodom and Gomorrah was, in its day, the Afghan opium fields, the Golden Triangle, and the British East India Company rolled into one. Its product was known as the grapes of Gomorrah, to others as wormwood, and a certain Jesus Christ would himself one day be offered its numbing comfort as he hung dying in agony on a Roman cross. Forget the stories of its sexual depravities and deviant proclivities. This town was an efficient drug-dealing operation, second only to the CIA, which was around back then. No, it wasn't. I'm assuming he means today. And its market at the beginning of an increasingly immoral age of bronze. was only getting bigger. I mean, even back then they were doing it. The more things change, the more they stay the same. Quite naturally, Sodom and Gomorrah's opium trade had proved remarkably recession-proof in the aftermath of the Tower of Babel economic debacle. People always got to get high. Under such circumstances, people just want to forget, kick back, and get out of it. Opium has an excellent capacity to help you do just that, and its addictive properties ensured a ready supply of willing debitors to the temple-based merchant bankers who had survived the fallout from Babel. Due to its burgeoning wealth and influence as a result of the trade of opium, Sodom and Gomorrah proved a robust economic model, perfectly capable of stepping into Babel's shoes. It quickly became a magnet for drug traffickers and moneylenders all over. One such trader and his friend, however, would soon find themselves unwilling witnesses to a new onslaught of interplanetary skirmishes, with dire consequences for the now flourishing Sodom and Gomorrah economy, and what would be the beginnings of a series of terrifying reminders of what still was the most potent force in determining the future of mankind. Sodom and Gomorrah suddenly ceased to exist. In one night, the drug-dealing capital of the Old Testament world was completely obliterated. In a way that would haunt kings and paupers alike and scar forevermore the psyches of those who would do naughty things in public toilets. What? The trader and his friend mooching about their business in and around Sodom and Gomorrah were a certain Lot and Abram. Lot got out just in time thanks to a warning from Abram, who seemed to have had prior knowledge of what was coming down on the city. On the way out, Lot's wife unwisely took a look back at the rain of carnage annihilating the city, and reportedly, as the expression goes, froze into a pillar of salt in sheer terror of the sight. A massive interplanetary arching bolt of plasma, vaporizing the Earth at its white-hot point of contact, will do that to you. A John Martin painting captures the carnage inflicted on Sodom and Gomorrah. That really happened? I always thought that was just a story. Or maybe it was the spectacle of an out-of-control Mars or Venus unexpectedly looming large in the night sky, while indiscriminately pouring giant electrical flames onto the Earth that did it. In any case, Earth had just been given another reminder that Venus or Mars, I'm not sure which one, for this particular event, still had the capacity to turn up at inconvenient times. The upshot was that Sodom and Gomorrah was gone, and warrior kings the world over now had a whole new set of problems to deal with, least of which was the various people under their control were demanding that they do something about it. But what to do? Enter our friends, the Priest Kings, the original Blue Bloods. They had an interesting solution for these warrior king upstarts. A set of sexy rituals designed to placate the angry gods that would consolidate power over the people, except that they weren't sexy at all, because since the end of the Silver Age, these rituals had degenerated into truly frightening ceremonial, complete with the sexual debauching of chicks, followed by their actual agonizing murder. Oh God, that's terrible. It's just wicked and horrible. The Saturn death cult begins. They called it kind of a sex magic within the hidden secret societies and mystery schools from previous age. The mythologies and legends recorded the actual planetary events of the Golden Age had been distorted into literal humanistic dramas. These dramas were then to be physically reenacted out as ritual by those aspiring to own the legacy of Saturn's power and authority as creator. Under this scenario, you could pick out any number of warped sexual patterns within mythology and turn it into perverted sexual satisfaction mask as ceremony. Old man Saturn takes young Venus as a bride in the myths. So on Earth, the king takes a child, priestess of Aphrodite, and has sex with her. Is the warrior god born of Venus, who rebels against Saturn and ultimately ascends to heaven to have sex with his mother. So warrior kings
Been getting any?
Only your sister.
Well, better my sister than my mom, though my mom's not bad.
Aftermath.
The warrior kings find themselves doing the same thing in defiance of their fathers. Check out King David's son, Absalom, in the Bible. That's just disgusting. Saturn, under his Greek identity as the god Kronos, devours his own children. So human kings have reportedly done the same with human children. Possibly even their own, as the occasion demands. See the suspected antics of one Caligula. That's so disgusting. It's hard to read, really. Jupiter Zeus determines to take Saturn Kronos' crown by gutting him to release his previously devoured sisters and brothers from Saturn's bowels. Zeus then promptly marries his sister Hera. Naturally, earthly kings follow suit and end up marrying and having sex with their sisters. Moronic inbreed errors ensue, and today we can see the legacy of this policy within our various political elites. Well, I don't know about it. Maybe calling them elite, maybe sick and demented is more like it. Rubens' depiction of Saturn devouring his own children. Some human kings have been accused of trying to emulate this act, though no real public evidence of this exists. Man, I don't know how that ever got started. And so on. Ritual sex act after ritual sex act. Blood sacrifice after blood sacrifice. Ritualistic act of cannibalism after ritualistic act of cannibalism. The Silver Age's need to record actual cosmic events as mythic records to ensure doomsday lessons would not be forgotten was eroded into what became a sex ritual control mechanism. This mechanism could be seen as the first applications of shadow government-sponsored mind control programs. They were designed to reduce once proud warrior kings to the role of sex puppets in an insane attempt to imbue a supposed elite class of people with the authority of Saturn as cosmic lord and creator. Power politics on Earth had taken a nasty turn, even as the planets Mars and Venus continued to menace the population's existence. Leave it up to humans to see it as demented as possible. It's almost impossible to contemplate what these blue bloods were thinking of their belief that disgusted and perverted rituals could alter the physical courses of physical planetary bodies. However, it seems this toxic nonsense was now a worldwide phenomenon. Human sacrifice goes global. In the New World, the elites of the Amerindian nations practiced horrific variations on these same themes on the great stone pyramids and temples still standing there today. Lesser American tribes, complete with their totem representations of the Axis Mundi as backdrops, did the same thing with lesser resources at their disposal. The result was a still very unpleasant experience for their unfortunate victims. These peoples routinely practiced ritualized cannibalism as part of their royal and military etiquette, even up to within recent memory. The Phoenicians were notorious for their child sacrifices, revolting even the hard-bitten Romans by their practices. Even Israelite kings in the Bible repeatedly threw their firstborn into fires in self-serving ritual acts of sacrifice. Why didn't they sacrifice themselves? European pagans indulged in macabre human sacrifices of war prisoners and possible acts of cannibalism to mark cosmic events, while certain African tribes refined painful mutilation ceremonies involving child deaths. Enter the Hebrews. For a more in-depth analysis of the ancient Hebrew experience, see the book Saturn Doth Go. Well, yeah, that's where we're at. However, there was one class of people that didn't necessarily see the raids of Mars and Venus as the acts of gods, but, and here is the subtle difference, they rather viewed such cosmic events as righteous manifestations of the one true God's anger and justice. On its next flyby, Venus was to give these people the impetus to break free from a state of national slavery and establish a nation under a one true God. The exodus of Israel out of Egypt would be marked by yet more cataclysmic events, resulting in multiple falls of once powerful warrior kings and a number of nations. Most prominently, that of Egypt, the kingdom born out of the arrival of refugees escaping the cataclysm that had sunk Atlantis at the end of the now distant Golden Age. The story of the Israelite exodus out of Egyptian slavery is replete with references to what can only be described as the effects of yet more cosmic interactions between planetary bodies. It's been postulated that the famous 10 plagues of Exodus and the parting of the Red Sea were the physical gravitational effects of a close pass by Venus on its violent and erratic path to its present-day orbit. As far as the Israelites were concerned, the highly convenient approach of Venus was a result of divine timing on the part of their deity. They made no reference to the planet in their writings, only to the power of their god. Whatever one's take on the causes of the Exodus, the Israelite interpretation of events marked full-blown revolution in the way people perceived cosmic upheavals as an expression of God or gods. Instead of attributing the actual bodies involved with godlike status, the Israelite way of thinking was to identify the cosmic upheavals as evidence of a one true God's power. Under this interpretation, planet Saturn was not the actual creator, but the tool of the one true, yet still hidden creator. And so too were the subsequent actions of all the other planets involved in the great cosmic dramas since the Golden Age. The next leap forward in an Israelite train of logic was to conclude that the actual physical events in the cosmic upheavals of the Golden Age, as well as those in their own age, were actually nothing less than the one true Creator's first actual communication or message to mankind. According to this train of thought, the physical effects of interplanetary upheavals were of no divine consequence, unless one could discern and understand the intrinsic message being communicated by such events. Cosmic upheaval and interplanetary disturbances were now viewed as the divinely communicated word of the Creator, or the logos of the Creator. The conclusion was simple and very monotheistic. Work out the message behind a series of essentially natural events, and you were effectively understanding and communicating with the Creator. You would subsequently be able to understand the Creator's motives and the Creator's objectives. Under this methodology, a careful observer of the consequences of the Creator's actions in nature could then proceed with the sure authority that they were acting in the best interests of the Creator's plan for the future of His creation. In essence, what the Israelites represented was a rediscovery of what the priesthoods at the beginning of the Silver Age tried to institute through the careful recording as mythology of the cosmic events witnessed during the Golden Age. Stated again through the construct of mythology, they had hoped to impress upon future generations an overall message with warnings on how to avoid another doomsday scenario. Ritual as validation of the elite. To the warrior kings and the elites immersed in the performance of rituals, this concept of direct communication with the divine by simple observation and understanding of natural events was simply intolerable. They were the aristocracy of purpose, and their purpose in life was to perform rituals on behalf of humanity. Only through carefully staged reenactments by chosen human representatives playing out the actions attributed to the gods could the path to true enlightenment and the comprehension of any hidden message be attained. The grander the ritual, the loftier the temple, the more likely you were to experience its hidden message. The expense of this alone meant your average Joseph didn't have a hope in hell of staging a decent ascent to enlightenment. And that's just the way the elite liked it. Enlightenment was not something to be taken lightly, and it certainly shouldn't be available to the great unwashed. You simply could not have a whole nation of people thinking that they were able to make individual judgments based on the simple observation of events or the study of written reports on such events. That would mean everyone would have the potential to understand the motives and plans of the Supreme Creator. Who would be special and elite then? No. Slamming on with ever more complicated and outlandish rituals was the only way to seriously maintain the true path to Golden Age type enlightenment. And the best way to do this was to ensure that every nation adopted the warrior king model of elite government. For and by the elite, guy in charge was the only acceptable order of nature in the minds of those elites who were, funny enough, the guys in charge. And that's where Israel found itself going wrong. Genocidal campaigns of conquest aside, which is another story. Israel rejects its gods, chooses a warrior king. Israel became corrupted. They took their eye off the ball and looked around to see if there was anything more exciting than the dreary headache of studying the Word. Maybe there was a sexier way of gaining an understanding of the mind of God. Bored with trying to understand God's message within creation, Israel decided it wanted a warrior king of its own to do the understanding for them. It got one, and within about 7 generations, they were ritually sacrificing their firstborn onto the fires of a pathetic bull god named Moloch, the Canaanite Saturn. Under warrior kings, it doesn't take long before people are doing this kind of thing, feeding babies to Moloch. Damn, that's inhumane. 1907 photo of the infamous Bohemian Grove staged a performance of The Cremation of Care, a play well performed at this elitist club to this day. Some believe the play represents a modern-day reenactment of Moloch worship, though there is no evidence that actual children have been sacrificed as part of the fun. Yeah, we got work to do if we want to save ourselves. Meanwhile, they're feasting on us. Do you ever get the feeling that the trap's slowly closing? Hey, I don't know if it's true. I hope it's not true. I'm just reading the book, but I'd rather know this if it was true than not know it. Babylon and the Love of Money. Babylon and the Love of Money. The Saturn death cult would first come to public preeminence in ancient Babylon. There, it would learn one vital lesson in the pursuit of true power: control the issue of money. The link between drugs and war. During the early part of the Bronze Age of man, a less than heroic pursuit dominated the development of trade in the ancient world. The insidious trade in opium had regained its footing in the Anatolia region, where a bunch of warrior kings were acting like modern-day drug cartel, warring over who should control the lucrative trade routes between Asia and the Western Kingdom. The most powerful cartel was the Troy cartel. That would be Troy the city and not Troy McLaughlin. But it was being seriously challenged by the upstart Agamemnon cartel. The battle lines were drawn, and the ensuing narco war engulfed the region for the next 10 years. The war only came to an end as a result of another planetary intervention, probably the same one that had allowed the Israelites to get out from under the Egyptians. However, the key development coming out of this conflict were the sudden advancements being made in weapons manufacture. New technologies allowed for greater kill ratio, and certain illuminated ones quickly realized the value in promoting an arms trafficking industry as a means to ensuring ever higher body counts for their ongoing blood sacrifice ritual. The penny had dropped. War as an expression of blood sacrifice was the new trend. An industry started to grow around the concept, with the development of military technology being a feature in the West. while a concentration on the art of war through strategy characterized the Eastern approach. Both resulted in the same thing. People got killed and blood flowed. For the Blue Bloods and Illuminated ones of the various occult secret societies and mystery school, everything was now as it should be. The warrior kings were happy. The lawyers and scribes charged with institutionalizing the various rituals were happy. The lawyers, the growing merchant class that was making a comeback after the Babel meltdown, which they always do. The slaves were worked and the people were taxed, and the victims of the seemingly endless rituals.
Sustaining this happy state of affairs, they were neither happy or unhappy. They were dead. One-on-one duels like the one pictured here between Achilles and Hector became passé as far as adherents to the Saturn death cult were concerned. The Saturn death cult had monetary control. Roughly 600 years after the cosmic events at Sodom and Gomorrah, the Exodus, even the sporadic marauding runs by the planets Mars and Venus, seemed to have come to an end, and all seemed well. But something was missing in the greater scheme of things. As far as the illuminated ones were concerned, they were still hankering for a return to the debt-based slavery system of Babel as the core economic model for mankind. A tweaking of strategy had to be carefully considered if they were to have total control over the affairs of man. While war had already been a source of blood-soaked satisfaction for the elite's ritualistic needs, it was an actual promotion of increasingly more contrived and barbaric wars that certain illuminated ones found an answer to killing two birds with one stone. Pun intended. Since the time of the Trojan narco conflict, it had been recognized that the casualties of war could be exploited for ritualistic satisfaction. But to date, capitalizing on these deaths had only been opportunistic at best. The key to a consistent supply of guaranteed bloodshed was to be found in the notion of warfare being an ongoing manufactured to order enterprise. And that would require money. That's what I'm thinking. As a result, and galvanized into action by promises of expanding material wealth and power, a rash of warrior kings made their first manipulated yet bloody steps towards the concept of empire, carefully selecting dates in accordance with now well-established blood rituals were chosen for them to initiate multiple wars of conquest. Yeah, they do pay attention to the dates and the time and all that. The happy result of these wars, as anticipated by the illuminated powers, was the immense scaling up of their blood sacrifice needs, while their warrior king puppets sank ever deeper into financial debt.
Yes, another soul.
Yeah. The equation was simple. War needs money, and borrowed money to pay for war debts equals debt. Debt equals slavery. If a kingdom could be manipulated into accepting debt, then that would make it a kingdom of slaves. Power to enslave whole kingdoms was in being the one who was owed that debt. However, this was only guaranteed if you controlled the issuance of the money borrowed by the warrior kings in the first place. In the Near East, at a place called the Plains of Dura, some highly positioned and privileged illuminated ones got busy. Babylon, the financial center of the ancient world. This image, by an unknown artist, shows the two real estate projects most associated with Babylon, its hanging gardens and the infamous Tower of Babel. The financial rise of Babylon. The warrior king of a growing city-state called Babylon had recently enjoyed a series of spectacular conquests. Babylon was now an empire, and its own cadre of mystery schools and secret societies held great public influence and renown. Through their overt, ritual-based control of the warrior king Nebuchadnezzar, these illuminated ones conspired to erect a golden image that would dominate the plains of Dura. Essentially, this was the world's first financial gold standard.
Endura was Babylon's answer to the modern Federal Reserve System of the United States. Anybody not adhering to this gold standard in matters of trade and commerce within Babylon was to be ruthlessly exterminated by a fiery death.
Yes.
The temples once again started to issue money as a debt on their own behalf against this new gold standard. These same temples, controlled by the illuminated ones, quickly became rich. The great public ceremony celebrating the success of the new financial system was only marred by a mysterious upsurge in the disappearance of Babylonian children. The almost forgotten Israelites, their own warrior king experiment such a dismal failure that they were now captives of the Babylonian Empire, had a serious problem with this golden image. See the Bible's book of Daniel, chapter 3. Their understanding of commerce and trade denounced the issue of money as a debt as being nothing more than criminal usury, an abominable practice, according to their own priesthood, who had somehow survived the deprivations of their own warrior kings and corrupt secret societies. The standard started to fall apart. Illuminated ones of the Babylonian mystery schools needs of dealing with the arrival of deadly Persian warrior kings and later rampant Greek demigod by the name of Alexander. Fall of Babylon. The Saturn death cult goes underground. Babylon fell quickly, its great gold standard experiment nipped in the bud. And one night Babylon ceased to be its own master, and its own illuminated ones joined their Israelite nemesis as fellow captives in their own city. Their golden image now laying in ruins. The remnants of Babylon's secret societies and mystery schools melted away into the desert night to be reborn as Mystery Babylon. Banished, predictable. Here, the biblical prophet Daniel, one of the main Hebrew adversaries to the establishment of a financial Babylon gold standard.
Except those needed for internal order and a new United Nations peace force. And it
Thank you for watching, everybody. I'll see you soon. Getting better every day. We're on the rebound.